Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We are on episode 15 of My Hero Academia, and it has been a long week. I didn't realize that they were scheduled to go on a break, and so last week I got up, got my coffee, had my breakfast, and was like, okay, getting ready to watch My Hero Academia, and I went to see the episode, and it wasn't there. And I was like, oh no. Which is fine. It was 4th of July weekend. I'm in the US, so I had things that I could do, but I was kind of sad. I was like, man, I've gotten so used to my morning ritual of getting up and watching My Hero Academia that it kind of threw me off. So, and then Horikoshi took a week's break on the manga, so there was no manga, there was no anime. It was like a week without My Hero Academia. I was like, this feels weird. So, I'm very happy that things are back to the norm of getting this episode. And this season has really kicked off. Like, we've gotten into the meat of the plot. Hawk's doing double agency things, the Endeavor agency, our main trio, Bakugo, Deku, and Todoroki, just in the agency getting to work on things. I'm really excited. And we got a new OP, we got a new ED, like everything's setting up for the second core of the season, which is really, really fun. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to it because this is not really a spoiler, but if you're a manga reader, then you know that they're rearranging some things with the plot. Like some chapters are being rearranged, and I think that it's a good idea. I think it's made it more cohesive for those that are anime only, that the plot is moving at a more streamlined pace. And plus they've got the movie coming out this month in Japan, so they're trying to like tie all that in. And so I'm okay with it because as a reactor and somebody reviewing the series, it's fresh to me because I kind of know what's going to happen. I've not reread the manga until after each episode, but I kind of have an idea of what's going to happen. But with this, since they've rearranged it, I don't know what's coming. So it's kind of a surprise. So I'm really excited to see what they do with this episode. And then, as always, I'll go back and read the manga chapters that it covers, if I can find them. Now they're all over the place. And then we'll do a non-spoiler discussion and a spoiler discussion. So pretty exciting stuff. I'm really looking forward to see what they do with this episode. But yeah, it's good to have My Hero Academia back. I mean, last week I got to review and react to a movie and put that on instead. But this is a nice change of pace. So back to the regular scheduled business, right? So let's do this, y'all. Let us start it's technically episode 103, but episode 15, One Thing at a Time. Interesting. But we are going to start that here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Ooh, so this episode of My Hero Academia was very, very interesting. Very interesting. Lots of implications, and I'm going to try to. There were a lot of spoilers in this episode, a lot of things discussed as far as spoilers go, but I'm going to try to limit myself and not run into that. So I'm going back through the episode to talk with y'all. I think it's important to note just how impressive it is that Hawks is juggling so many things at once, because he not only is working as a hero, he's working for the Hero Commission, which are kind of a separate secretive entity in themselves. And he's also playing a double agent, working for the Hero Commission, but spying on the Liberation Army and the League of Villains and trying to convince them that he's on their side. And on the surface, it would seem like, why would they believe Hawks is working with them? He's the number 2 hero. But when you think about it, it does make sense because they've gotten so many heroes on their side with the Liberation Army. There's so many that are already converted over that it would only make sense that Hawks is just one of them. He just happens to be like a celebrity among heroes. And so, of course, they're going to take advantage of that because, as we've seen in the council meeting, they're like, oh, Hawks, you have a lot of influence. And you're a social media, you're an influencer on social media. So, of course, we can get the young base, with you on our side. We can get the young base converted as well. So it's all like just building the cult up, right? And so, of course, they would welcome Hawks with open arms. At least the Liberation Army would. Obviously, there's still some shades of mistrust with the League of Villains and everything because they're not letting Hawks know everything. And as you notice in this scene where he meets with them, Shigaraki is not there. Toga mentions Shigaraki, but he's not present. There's other members of the League there, but not Shigaraki, which is interesting. And we'll talk about that in the spoiler discussion. But yeah, the Meta Liberation War, the books that he's passing out to the heroes, and Hawks is like, yeah, I'm doing that because I gotta put up the facade. And I love Hawks is such the way they animate him. He's such a visual storyteller with his eyes. Like he conveys so much emotion through his eyes, like whether they're gleaming or whether they look cold, etc. But we have our pinstriped antagonist here, which I'll talk about in the spoiler discussion. But yeah, I love that we can see hearing Twice again. Twice is one of my favorites in the League of Villains. I love him. And hearing his voice and him being like, I don't understand the Meta Liberation Army. I don't get it. Can you teach me? And Hawks is like, sure, it's not hard. I'll teach you. And Twice is like, yay. But yeah, the whole point is they say you're a walking billboard, which Hawks is. He's just a celebrity among heroes. So he's a perfect advertisement. He's like, the liberation ideology will spread quickly with you, with your base of teens and 20-somethings. Yeah, get the young kids on board, right? I love that amongst the League here, Toga, she is just like a kid that was invited to a board meeting that's like, I don't even, it's like when in a board meeting, council of adults have like a student trustee or something. Like where I work, we have a student trustee, and usually they're just like, I'm here. I don't really have a say in all this, but I'm here representing. And so that's kind of what I think of Toga. But of course, Toga would be like, look, there's Deku. Like, she's just like, hey, I've got my iPad. I'm not, you guys all have your nice laptops. I got my iPad here. I'm not even paying attention. I'm like, oh, I love it. I love it that hers is different. And it's so good. And then Twice, what a coincidence. What a coincidence indeed. Twice, you're kind of onto things. And then, of course, Dobby brings up, like, oh, these kids, they don't really seem like they're up to snuff. And Hawks is like, I love that Hawks is like, good. I want you to think that. I ship Dobby and Hawks so much. So seeing them, like, in a scene together, I'm like, yes. It's like two sides of a coin. I love it. I love it. But yeah, fun times. And I love how sincere Hawks looks. He's like, well, they are just students. Like, his eyes are so sincere there, but you know that he's just so happy that they're not onto the fact that, yeah, the students are gaining strength. But that leads to the other point here, and a point that both Hawks and Endeavor seem a bit uneasy about. And I love that Hawks leaves a feather behind to eavesdrop. Like, that's so good. That's so good. It's also traced, so maybe that one doesn't have a tracker on it. Otherwise, I'm like, wouldn't they know that you're, listening in on them? But maybe it's one of the feathers that doesn't have a tracker. I love the panel of Toga, or the drawing of her with Tokyo, with Japan like on fire and all the bases in the background. I love it. I love it. So yeah, Hawks and Endeavor bring up a really good point here, in that the Hero Commission wants them to do the work studies, because the work studies had kind of been suspended after everything went down in like seasons 3 and 4. And so the Hero Commission is like, we want the work studies to continue. And their reasoning is a little bit shady, in that we're gearing up for a war of the heroes versus the Meta Liberation Army and the League of Villains. We're gearing up for a war in 4 months. And we want these hero studies to go on because these kids at UA need to know how to work as heroes and plan for what's to come. Which is basically insinuating that if the heroes don't do their part and don't get the job done, we're going to stick these kids in to do it for you. Which is problematic because these are 15, 16-year-old kids and you're sending them off to a war against adults. And you're weaponizing their quirks for this war. That's kind of problematic in a lot of ways. And I like that Endeavor and Hawks are both kind of uneasy about that. They're like, are we really going to rely on these kids as insurance in case if we fail? Are these kids emotionally ready for that? I don't think so. No. We saw how traumatizing the death of Night Eye was for Ochako and Tsuyu and Deku. I mean, that was one hero's death and how traumatizing it was. And the Hero Commission's like, well, if you guys all die, we're going to stick the kids in to do the job. So it's like, that just seems like a recipe for some much needed therapy afterwards, if at the very least. So yeah, that's slightly problematic. I do like how Endeavor in all of this, like I said in the reaction, Endeavor comes across as blunt and dense sometimes, but he's really smart. Like, Endeavor is practical and a strategist. And he's like, I like that in these episodes, since season 4, the end of season 4, we're getting more into Endeavor's mind and what he's thinking. And I like that usually characters like Endeavor, who start out as really antagonistic and he's has some major flaws and has done some really bad things in the past. Usually characters like him, we don't get inside his head. We just see other characters react to him and see his actions, but we don't get to see his thoughts. But in Endeavor's case, we are getting to see them, which I think is smart on Horikoshi's part. It makes us empathize more with Endeavor and at least understand him more. I don't think his actions are still forgivable at all. I mean, what he's done in the past. But I appreciate that Horikoshi is giving us insight on him so that as he tries to move forward with Shoto and with the others, we kind of understand his line of thinking. Burnin is amazing. I love her. I love how fiery her attitude is, and she's just not fazed by anything. It really suits her ability, and I really like it. As far as Endeavor taking on Shoto, Deku, and Bakugo, I really appreciate Horikoshi, what he did here with Shoto and Endeavor, with Shoto saying, look, you think I'm here to bond with you and you want to put on the dad act, but he's like, stop. He's like, that's not why I'm here. I'm here because you're the number one hero. I need to learn how to control my ability. It's important that I do this. I'm using you as help. The one I really respect is All Might. He's the hero I look up to. It's like, he's the hero that I look up to. He's like, I'm just using you to get better. So don't put on this act like we're going to become close, which makes sense. I mean, it's not an easy thing to just forgive Endeavor for what he's done and move forward. Shoto's like, that's not what I'm here for. But I think the fact that Shoto's even there and even listening to Endeavor is at least some kind of step forward. And I appreciate that. And Endeavor realizing that that's the case, I think is important too. So that he's not trying, the wires aren't crossed. The communication is clear there. And I'm glad that Shoto had that conversation. And Deku and Bakugo are just awkwardly standing there like, well, we're not here to get in on your family drama, but okay. So yeah, there's that. I also like here in talking about influences, Tokiyami and his influence on Hawks, because Hawks saying, I wasn't interested in training the next generation at all, but then you kind of changed my mind and saw potentially what that would feel like. So I love that Tokiyami behind the scenes has been an influence on one of our major heroes, and he doesn't even quite realize it. It's like, I love it. I absolutely love it. And we can see everybody here and what they're doing in their work studies. I wanted to go back and look and see who was working with who. To see who in Class 1A and Class B were working together, because I think that's kind of interesting, like how the quirks match up with other heroes. So Tokiyami is with kind of the welding guy and the more industrial quirk users, which kind of makes sense. Of course, the ones that can fly and float, Tsuyu and Ochako, are with Nejire, and the woman that can turn into a dragon. They're with her. And then Ida, of course, is with Manuel. I love it. Old duo from the past. Tetsu and Kirishima with Fat Gum. I love it. I love it. And then, of course, Kamui Woods, Edshot, and Mount Lady, our heroic trio, are with the Vine Woman, and then Sero, Mineta, and Kaminari. What a combination. That's so interesting. And then we have our martial arts people. We have Shoji, and then we have Double Impact. And not Shoji, but oh gosh, he has the tail. We have him, Double Impact, and Sato together with Beast. And then, of course, Gang Orca with this guy that looks like Sonic the Hedgehog. And then Shoji and Jiro. Oh, amazing. Amazing. And then the mix match, like miscellaneous crew, Washu with Koji and Manga. And I love that he seems to know what Manga's thinking. It's like, oh, great. And then, yeah, Momo, the two recommended ladies, Momo and the Snake Woman, with this guy that looks like a magician. And then Mina and Ayama with the samurai. And then we just see Pony and Momo. Love it. Love it. It's so good. Really, really good stuff. I like it. But yeah. And then you had to show us Mirio by himself. Why? Mirio just looking happy with the wind blowing through his hair. No big deal. No chopping onions here. So yeah, getting back to your thing, I have to comment that Deku's muttering, hilarious, and that Endeavor instantly knows what he's talking about. He's like, so what you're saying is, and they're like, how'd you know? Because Deku does have that tendency, like, to be nerdy and mutter and overanalyze things. It's wonderful. It's just wonderful. And then, yeah, I like that Bakugo is self-aware that he has a really good quirk, but he needs to know the limitations of it. Like, what can I not do? What do I have to? Because Bakugo has just realized the power of friendship and Nakama and how important it is to have others support you. And so he's like, I need to know what I can't do that I'm going to need help with. And I think that's growth for Bakugo. For Bakugo to go from someone that was like, I am perfect, everything's great, I don't need you scrubs. For him to go from that to being someone that recognizes that, yeah, I may need assistance. And I need to know when that's going to be. I'm like, growth, Bakugo. Good job. Way to go. And Endeavor realizes that. He's like, you're kind of like me. I totally get it. I also like that Endeavor says, you're one of us. When he talks to Deku, he says, you're one of us, a quirk whose ability, a person whose quirk can harm them. Because when you think about back at the end of season 4 in episode 25, Endeavor's quirk, he overheats. So his quirk can hurt him. And so he's like, Deku, I think he pegged Deku in the same category as All Might. And he's seeing that there's a little bit more complexity to Deku as a hero. And that he has more in common with Endeavor than he thought. And so I think that's a cool observation that he makes. And then Endeavor wastes no time. He's like, y'all, if you can keep up, he's like, your goal is to get to a situation faster than me. That's your goal. Get to the place faster than I can. That's your goal. And he's quickly, and he shows just how he's using his quirk to propel him and get there fast. And I like that he tells Bakugo, he's like, this isn't high school. Like, if you don't arrive on time, it's not that you're going to lose points and fail a test. It's like someone's life's on the line. So he treats it very, very seriously. And so he's like, this is, a life or death situation. And whether Bakugo likes it or not, him and Shoto get kind of grouped in the same category a lot because they both have issues. They had the similar issues with the licensing exam. They both, whether they like it or not, are very similar characters and have similar struggles. And Endeavor's realized that. And he's like, so you two are going to work on the same thing. And then Deku, you're going to work on over here on this. I'm trying to make your first two abilities as natural as breathing. And then you can worry about Black Whip. You gotta it's one thing at a time. And I like that because I feel like Deku at the end of this episode was starting to get overwhelmed. Where Deku's like, I've got 6 quirks to learn on top of the one that I've just spent 4 seasons mastering. And Endeavor's like, whoa, hold your horses. One thing at a time. Let's master this one thing and then you move on to the next. Like I know you're in a hurry, but getting things down properly, the basics of the basics are essential. You can't run until you learn how to walk, right? So this was a good episode. I like how they've blended the comedy and the action that's very typical of My Hero Academia with this looming darkness in the background. Like the plot with Hawks is like a looming, slowly ticking time bomb. It's like we're getting all these fun moments with Endeavor and the agency and Bakugo, Deku, and Todoroki, but in the background of everything, there's Hawks being like, hey, in 4 months, stuff's gonna go down and it's not gonna be good. And I really like how that episode framed this. But I have a lot of spoilers to talk about, so that's what we're gonna do next. But I hope you all enjoyed this reaction. This was a good episode. This is a nice episode to come back to after a break. But so please feel free to comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. If you are going to spoil anything with the manga, please include a spoiler tag in your comment. But otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Stay safe and take care. And I'll talk to you all again soon with more My Hero Academia. For those of you sticking around for spoilers, we have some things to talk about. Some things to talk about indeed. I'm conflicted. I am conflicted because here's my thoughts. Here are my thoughts. On the one hand, and I'm going to sound like a contradiction to the beginning of this reaction. On the one hand, I really like that they are trying to streamline and smooth everything in the timeline with this season to make it fluid. I appreciate that. I think it's a smart decision. I think the anime-only people they won't know that stuff's skipping around. They're just like, okay, cool, here's episodes. That's fine. It makes me as a manga reader like get kind of anxious and bunched up inside because I'm like, but you're not showing these parts that are really important. And this episode, this is the first time in the season that this episode has combined moments from chapters into one scene, and I don't know how I feel about that. So I've got some pictures pulled up to show y'all. kind of what I'm talking about. So this episode covered chapters 245, parts of chapter 246. We'll talk about that. 247 and 248. It covered 247 and 248 pretty much beat for beat, with the exception of the last page of 248 was left out, and we'll talk about that when I get to it. But 245 is, chapter 245 is where Hawks comes to see the Council and the Liberation Army. So it's so weird in the manga because at this point in the anime we've skipped over the Shigaraki versus the Liberation Army. We've skipped over that part, and I'm hoping we come back to it. I really am. I think we will. I hope we do. But we've skipped over that. We've gone straight to the boardroom meeting, and it's pretty much beat for beat. I like the little finishing touch. I put this panel up here, and I'm going to leave it up for a while, because there's several things in this one page alone that I love that Horikoshi does. The first thing is establishing Hawks' Joker face. Like, when Hawks is not being serious, he's just like, it's like, his happy-go-lucky face. But if you notice, Horikoshi shrouds him in this gray shadow the whole time, especially with Dabi. And that's kind of like in his conversation, to kind of show us, the reader, that Hawks is not saying what he really thinks, especially in that last bottom left panel. It's clear from the shadows that he's not being truthful with Dabi, because when Dabi's like, it looks like they haven't grown much. And he's like, give them a break, they're still in high school. We know that he's lying. He's just saying that because he doesn't want Dabi to know how much the students have grown, because that would be a tip-off that the students are going to be a threat. So, I love that Twice was in this episode, but it made my heart break, because I was like, especially because this is the start of Hawks and Twice's relationship, and if you've read the manga, you know what happens to Twice, and it's so sad, and I'm like, oh god, this is starting the whole relationship with them. So, I love that Twice just randomly has a drink. He just tosses the drink. He's very Deadpool in this chapter. He just has the drink and then tosses it aside, which is hilarious because they're at this board meeting with the Liberation Army with Redestro, and I realized I said Redestro in the episode reaction, and I'm like, oh god, no one's been introduced to him yet, so I just spoiled his name. But I was like, too late, can't go back. So the voice actor for Redestro is perfect. I love it. Like, it's exactly how I pictured the voice. There's like a deepness to it that's menacing, but then he's also like really upbeat and jovial. It's kind of like, Redestro reminds me a lot of Loki, like Tom Hiddleston's portrayal of Loki. He reminds me a lot of that in terms of a character. Like he can be serious and menacing at times, but then also casual and snarky at other times. So I'm like, that's what his character reminds me of, and the voice acting is a perfect choice. I really love it. I can't wait to see more of it. But yeah, Twice just throwing the drink aside, and Toga having and I love that in the panel here, she's just on the tablet, and you kind of see in the background the little bubbles. It's Izuku. What a coincidence. I love that they animated that. That's great. Wonderful. But, so, the thing that's weird, well, first of all, show this panel. It's perfectly represented from the manga. The idea of Japan just in ruins, and she's like, courtesy of Tomura. And, of course, we don't see Shigaraki because he's with the doctor right now, but we don't know that if you're watching the anime. But yeah, he's with the doctor. So this is the cover for chapter 246, which is called Message. I really like this cover. Horikoshi does a good job of drawing them all in like their jackets and everything. It's very rainbow, all different colors. Like, it's all the girl characters, which I like. Like, there's Uryu, Ochako, Nejire, Jiro, Momo, Invisible Girl, and Mina. Like, I love that they're all there. Also, Horikoshi loves drawing TVs on his covers. He uses a lot of television on his covers, which is a cool little symbolism for like the way that media spreads in this world and the power of it. So I really like that too. But here's where this panel is where things get a little weird, and this is the first time it's done this in the anime with this season, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. We get Hawks roaming around the mansion, and he sees the guy that's there and the big tall dude that won't let him enter, which that part's all beat for beat the same. So they're talking about utilizing the students as, help for the heroes, etc. if we fail. But there's two parts of this. One, we have Redestro and this little like encounter between Redestro and Hawks that's on the left side here. I love that in the manga because Redestro is like, you've been handing out books to the heroes. Like, he corners him about it. He corners him about giving the books out, which is really important because as you're reading the manga, you're like, you don't want Hawks to get caught being a double agent. And this is one of those weird moments where they kind of just have this standoff. And he's like, you've been handing out these books. And Twice is in the background. If you notice, Twice is in the background behind Redestro in those panels. And so I love the smile, because Redestro comes across as very chill and happy, but he's always like the Hulk. He's always angry, and he's trying to hide it because his anger is his power. His stress is his power. And so there's the panel of him smiling, and then Hawks being like, and him smiling even more, and Hawks being like, and that just like it slowly zooms in. I love that. And they don't show it in the anime. I'm like, instead, with this next page, they actually took the conversation that Redestro and Hawks had here and put it in the boardroom scene, which is fine narratively. It's fine. It's just you don't get that showdown between him and Hawks earlier, where you think that Redestro's onto the fact that Hawks is a traitor and a double agent working for the Hero Commission. It's kind of a fake out, but then he does the whole point in the boardroom. He's like, oh, well, you've been handing out books, so it's great. You're going to get the young kids on board. And this is where Twice says, oh, I don't get it. Will you fill me in sometime? And Hawks is like, sure, it's not too hard. Yeah. And that whole thing with Hawks and Twice is building up to them having a moment later, which is going to probably happen in season 6. And that's leading up to their trust as partners. So I don't know. It was very odd. I get uneasy because they've not introduced Redestro yet. And I'm like, he's such a big part of the story that I'm like, when are we going to introduce him? And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But because to formally introduce his character, I feel like they're all going to do it at once. When he has the dealer that deals Twice his weapons and everything. I feel like they're all going to do Redestro's introduction and all of that leading up to My Villain Academia all at once. I just don't know when it's going to happen. And how if they're gonna combine that and make him getting the army the formal ending of the season. I don't know how they're gonna do that exactly. But I like that in this bottom panel here, though, we get Hawk saying, I'm not so sure about all this myself. I don't think he said that in the anime, which it's pretty important that both Endeavor and Hawks are questioning the Hero Commission and their actions, because they're the top 2 heroes. So the fact that they're questioning what the government is doing is pretty relevant. So yeah, then we go back to another thing that I wish they would have had in the anime is this next page. We get that Endeavor comes in and says he's going to take Shoto and Deku and Bakugo for now. And Endeavor even says in the panel, he's like, trainees as insurance, bah, I don't accept it. He's not on board with it. But for now, all I can do is keep them with me. He's like, I can just do what I can for now. And we don't get to see this panel of Hawks, like this conversation that he's having. He kind of has it in the anime, but it's not the same. This line that he says, even without me, they would have been fast enough. He's like, yeah, I was tricking Dobby because they would have handled it even without me. And it's like, And then we cut to, I love this panel, this double spread. It's what we did see in the anime. There were 2 parts to this moment, and one part they didn't show, and I wish they had, but I know why they didn't show it, but I'm going to talk to y'all about it. This first part they did show, and I love that. Like Tokiyami, they're already strong, and he's like, looks over like he hears his name being mentioned. We get all of that. They're all even faster than me. But this is the part that they didn't show. And there's parts of this that they did show parts of it, like with Class 1A and Class 1B. They did show parts of it, but there's parts that they didn't. And I get why they didn't. For example, they don't show Fuyumi praying there, because we'll get her later on in the season. They didn't show her. The panel of All Might with his lip scrunched like he's sad, that's the most heartbreaking panel, like one of the most heartbreaking ones in the whole series, because All Might's worried for Deku and Bakugo and Shoto. And what we don't know at this point is that he's researching this panel. He's researching all the previous users of One for All. And this panel is probably, that panel of All Might is probably him realizing that all the users have died young and that Deku's in danger. And that's one of the saddest panels in the whole series. I hate it. And I was like, I get why they didn't show that in the anime, but they should have. And then the other 2 panels that they don't really show us, one is of Present Mike and Aizawa working with Eri and her horn, which is funny. They put Mirio right next to her. That's really funny. But the other one's of Kurogiri in the correctional facility, in the prison. Again, I don't think they're going to get to Aizawa and Present Mike's storyline with Kurogiri until season 6, because that's how it happens in the manga. I don't think they'll get to it this season. But it's there in the background. It's just there in the background, just waiting. It's fun stuff. So I absolutely love this panel. Of those of you that were like, really, that whole muttering thing, what does that look like in the manga? This is what it looks like. I love it. Like, they animated every line of dialogue from him, and he just gets faster and faster the more he talks. And Deku's mouth, if you look at his mouth in that panel, his mouth is animated to where it's moving really, really fast, like it's kind of blurry. Horikoshi, you madman. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's so good. And then, of course, Endeavor instantly understands what's going on, and Burning's like, how? But I love it, and I love the panel right beside it where it kind of quiets down, softens, and Endeavor's like, you've suffered due to your quirk, so you're one of us. And rereading this, it didn't dawn on me at the time, but Endeavor's not only thinking of himself when he says that line, but when you think about it now, he's also thinking of Toya. He's thinking of Dabi, because Toya's quirk hurts himself, just like Endeavor, except Toya's hurts him to a greater extent. So after rereading, I was like, oh, Endeavor's thinking of his own son too. It's like a double knife to the feels and all of that. So the last two panels I want to bring up. One is the cover page for chapter 248. Chapter 248 is called One Thing at a Time, and that's where this episode kind of ends at. So on this panel, we have Nejire and Ochako and Asuyu, and gosh, I can't remember her name, but she's the dragon. We have her in the cover page. I'm a little curious about the preview for next episode, because I think it's a filler episode. Because I don't remember Tsuyu and them. I don't remember in the manga at this point seeing Tsuyu and them go on an adventure with Selkie. I don't remember that at all. I really don't. And I'm like, why? My only question that I have trepidation for next week is, why, My Hero Academia? Why are we... You have all of My Villain Academia, Redestro, to worry about, and this other part that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. You have all of that content to get animated. Why are we spending an episode with Selkie? I'm like, I love Tsuyu, and I love Ochako and Nejire. I love them as characters, and I want to see them on adventures, but I'm like, we have a lot of ground to cover in this season. Why are we having a filler episode midway? What we doing here? So, I have a theory about it, and the theory has to do with, at the very end of chapter 248, the conversation with Endeavor and Deku happens, but then the chapter ends with Fuyumi being on the phone with Endeavor being like, hey, you guys have been really busy and doing lots of work for the last week. Why don't you bring Deku and Bakugo home for dinner, and I'll make us a big meal and we can all be a family. And I had talked about this in previous reactions. I think that season 5 is going to end with the ending thing. It's either going to end with Shigaraki getting the army and prepping for the war, or it's going to end with the ending scene. And so I think it could be that the episode 17 has them doing the meal and everything, but I don't know. I don't know how they're going to put that in the plot. But they still have that lead in to do, unless they're saving it for season 6, unless they're saving the whole ending arc for starting season 6 out, which is fine if they do it that way. That would kind of make sense, I guess. But I still just don't understand why they're doing a filler episode next week when they have all this other stuff to animate, unless they actually just animated it and realized that it wasn't what they wanted to end the season with, wasn't going to cover 25 episodes, so they put this one in. But I'm just like, because after episode 16, you still have 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. You have 9 episodes left, which seems like a lot of episodes, but there's a lot of ground to cover, so I just don't know. I'm not a fan of filler episodes at all, because they just seem like a waste, because they don't cover any canon material. It's just like, eh. So I'm not a fan of filler. So I'm gonna be as optimistic and positive as I can next episode. I'm gonna be as optimistic as I can be. I'm gonna try. But I'm so curious. And maybe it'll only be like half an episode. Maybe it'll just be like half the episode is this filler stuff, and then we're gonna get back into the rest of the thing. I don't know. I'm gonna be optimistic. I'm going to be optimistic and go in next episode being like, all right, we can do this. So I'm curious. But in any case, I hope you all enjoyed this reaction. Thank you for sticking around with me for spoilers. There's so much to go, and I'm really, I'm a big fan of the My Villain Academia arc and the Liberation Army battle. I'm a big fan of it in the manga. So it is like I've been on pins and needles this entire season waiting for it. And if they don't show it to us all in its full glory, I'm going to write the animation studio and be like, what are y'all doing? Because it's so good. And the OP teases it, so I know what's going to happen. It's just the waiting. In the words of Tom Petty, the waiting is the hardest part. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back next week with episode 16 of My Hero Academia. Bye.